your seats, we'd like to begin. I'm Sister Maureen. I'm on the leadership team of the Sisters of St. Joseph here in St. Louis Province. And on behalf of all of my sisters and our associates, I just want to thank you all for being here. It really means an awful lot to us. So, as we gather today to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March, we recognize that our presence here as Sisters of St. Joseph is part of a much longer history, one that began in 1650 in Le Puy, France. With the founding of the Sisters of St. Joseph, from the very beginning, our mission has been clear: to serve those in need, whether caring for orphans, the sick, prisoners, women in distress. Our sisters have always sought out the most vulnerable, responding with courage and compassion. That same commitment to justice carried us to St. Louis in 1836. By 1845, our sisters boldly opened St. Joseph's School of Negro Girls. They did this despite threats and intimidation. Sister Anna Joseph exemplified the fearless spirit of our congregation, educating and defending her students at a time when such work was not only unpopular, but it was dangerous. When our sisters traveled to Selma in 1965, they were continuing this legacy of standing with those who seek justice. They joined other women religious groups, a number of orders, Sisters of Loretto, Franciscan Sisters of St. Mary, Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, Mercy Sisters, etc. There must be a Mercy Sister. But not only other sisters, but other ministers, Protestant ministers, rabbis, and people of many faiths. Together, they formed a powerful, united presence, proving that the call to justice transcends theological and denominational boundaries. So, why do we gather here today? Not simply to honor history, but because the work remains unfinished. In a world still divided, the CSJ mission of love and unity is more vital than ever. Our charism calls us to move always towards profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction. But this love is not passive. It requires action, courage, and at times, defiance of injustice. Yes. The sisters who journeyed to Selma did not go alone. They were supported by a community, by people like Charles Vatterott Jr. and countless others who believed in their mission. Their story reminds us that social justice is never a solitary pursuit. It requires solidarity, shared purpose, and the understanding that our futures are bound together. Today, as we stand in their footsteps, may we do more than remember. May we carry their legacy forward, not just in word, but in action. And as is our custom, let us begin with a prayer. God of justice and compassion, we gather to remember those who walked in solidarity with the marginalized and oppressed. We recall the courage of our sisters who followed their conscience to Selma, and all who have worked for justice throughout history. Grant us their vision to see beyond the boundaries that divide us, their courage to stand with those who suffer injustice, and their wisdom to know that together we are more. May this gathering inspire us to continue their legacy, to be bearers of unity in a divided world, and to recognize your face in every neighbor we encounter. We ask this in the spirit of unity and reconciliation, and the people of God say, Amen. Well, now it is my pleasure to introduce to you these fabulous women who are on our panel today. I'd like to begin with Joyce Hart, who's at the end of the table. Joyce is a documentary filmmaker who produced Sisters of Selma. Which aired nationwide on PBS and received Regional Emmy nominations. She specializes in documentaries about lesser-known historical events, including immigrant stories and interfaith dialogue. Her current project explores employee-owned companies. She is originally from India, where she worked in radio and TV. However, now she works in Los Angeles. And she happened to be with us last night during that wonderful storm. So she's never coming back to say that. Next is our own Sister Barbara Moore at the other end of the table. Barbara joined the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet in 1955, earned a doctorate in higher education administration. Her 50-year career included nursing at St. Joseph's Hospital, both the old hospital and the new one, or just the old hospital in the old one in Kansas City. Leading Avila College's nursing program and directing community health initiatives in Kansas City. Though retired since 2015, and may I just say, we sisters never retire. We just get recycled. Barbara remains active on several boards and speaks on race and justice issues from her civil rights experience. But also, if you get a chance afterwards, ask her about some of her work in Africa. Next is Sister Barbara Lung, next to Joyce. Barbara is what we call in the Midwest a kissing cousin. She's our Sister of St. Joseph from Rochester. She dedicated her life also to healthcare and community service. She provided critical care at Good Samaritan Hospital from 1958 to 1968, treating civil rights activists injured during the 1965 Bloody Sunday March in Selma. It was one of the few, if not the only hospital that would treat people of color. She holds multiple nursing degrees and now ministers at St. Joseph's Northside in Rochester, a drop-in center serving dozens daily with meals and support. Next is Sister Rosemary Flanagan, sitting next to Sister. She's one of the shy Sisters of Selma. Rosemary entered the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet in 1948, earned a doctorate in philosophy from St. Louis University. Her 42-year educational career spanned from elementary to higher education, culminating with 17 years teaching philosophy at Rockhurst College. Now here's what she did after she retired. She spent 18 years at the Center for Practical Bioethics. A lecture series in her name addresses ethical issues in healthcare. And in the middle, between everyone sandwiched in, is Claire Bannerot-Hundelt. Claire is the Executive Director of Marillac Mission Fund since 2012, overseeing grants to St. Louis nonprofits serving vulnerable populations, including older adults, immigrants, and veterans. She previously directed nonprofit Service Center and Sister of Mercy Ministries. She holds a master's in social work from Washington University and is a St. Louis native. Claire is the 15th of 17 Bannerot siblings. With her husband, Bruce, she has 4 sons and 4 grandchildren. And last but not least is our moderator, our own Sister Mary Flick. Mary serves as formation coordinator for the St. Joseph Education Ministries, working with its members to ensure the Catholic identity and the values of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Sister Mary has also served as the St. Louis Province Justice Coordinator since 2015. And without any more comments, I invite you to a wonderful panel discussion.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this inspiring afternoon in conversation. As we begin, though, I'm still relishing the video, that wonderful film that we saw together. And as you might know, it's been a few years since it was filmed. And in those years, we've lost several of the members of the religious communities and others that were videotaped. So I invite all of us just to take a moment now and remember with gratitude the lives of so many who are not with us here today, but who played such an integral part of this video and this time in history. Thank you. Our goal today is to explore not just what happened 60 years ago, but how those events continue to shape our understanding of justice, of faith, of community action now, today. We'll spend about 45 minutes in conversation before opening up the floor to your questions. So let's get right to it. I'd like to start with Sister Barbara Lum. Sister Barbara, you were already working at Good Samaritan Hospital in Selma when the marches took place. Could you share with us some specific events or moments during that time that really left a lasting impact on you?
I would say the first of those events that really impacted me was the shooting and then subsequent death of Jimmy Lee Jackson. He was shot by a state trooper in Marion, Alabama. It was in the film, trying to protect his grandfather and his mother from state troopers. And he ran with them into a small cafe, and while he was there, a state trooper shot him in the stomach. He was brought after some delay to Good Samaritan at night, during the night, and had surgery and was in the hospital, and people were, talking about this is Jimmy Lee Jackson. And I made rounds every day in the hospital. So each day when I would come into his room, he would put his hand out, take my hand, and say to me, "Sister, don't you think this is a high price to pay for freedom?" And that, I've never forgotten him or that. And when he ultimately died, he had seemed like he was recovering, and when he ultimately took a turn for the very worst and died, that was the catalyst for the march to Montgomery. The first march for Bloody Sunday, but then the subsequent march all the way to Montgomery for voting rights, a peaceful march, as was the first march. The marchers were very much into being peaceful marchers, protesting for voting rights for Black people. I could say one more thing. Another very significant event was Bloody Sunday itself. When there were 3 beds in the emergency room. It was a small hospital, small emergency, and people kept pouring in. And one of our sisters was doing triage, so some of the marchers who didn't seem as if they needed suturing went into the dining room, and there were a couple of our sister nurses who managed things there. And I was with a doctor in emergency, and there were 2, another nurse and doctor, another nurse and doctor. And the doctor I was with said to everybody whom he stitched, "I know this wasn't your idea. I know you would never have thought of such a thing. It was outside agitators." And although I was silent, I thought, I don't think it needed outside agitators for you to be aware of how unfair life was for Black people in Selma at that time.
And if I could just follow up with another question. Archbishop Tulin did not allow you to march. So how did you feel about that restriction? And how did you find other ways to contribute to the movement?
I didn't have a lot of feeling about, well, I did, and I didn't, about the restriction, but we had no intention of being put out of Alabama, out of his diocese, when we had a hospital to run and a grade school, and we had a school of nursing. I mean, if we were gone, we did not have a provision for who was going to take over this ministry, so it was kind of a no-brainer for us to stay where we were and do what we were doing.
Thank you. Sister Barbara Moore, I can ask you a few questions. When did you know you had to go to Selma? Was there a specific event or call that really inspired you to make that journey?
Well, it was right after Bloody Sunday that we received a call from our Bishop Sullivan if I were interested in going to Selma with the delegation of priests and sisters from Kansas City, Missouri. I said yes. And that's what we were responding to be supportive and witness
tell me this, Barbara, how did your community in St. Louis react to your decision to go? Was there support?
I must say, very supportive, and I've always felt that. And there was a substantive delegation of us from Kansas City who went. There were 2 women religious from every woman's religious group in the archdiocese, as well as several of the priests that went in our delegation. We always had the support of our bishop.
Well, Barbara, how did the experience in Selma really change you? How did it shift your perspective? Did it shift your perspective on race and justice? And what kind of impact did it have on your ministry going forward?
Well, silence is not an option when I see injustice. But I was reared that way. I'm a convert to Catholicism. And it was important for us. We grew up with, if you don't go to church on Sunday, Protestant, you don't go anyplace else. And get your education. Those are the 2 mantras that those of us who are still living in our family remember. So it was very important.
And so you continued to, in many ways that...
Oh yes, your silence is not an option. Try to use the proper means of communication, the proper channels of communication, but to speak up when I feel it's the need, and appropriately, most of the time.
I take it there's nothing more you want to say on that. Sister Rosemary, yes, you were in that first march on Bloody Sunday. As someone with a background in philosophy, how did your academic training influence your understanding of what was happening in Selma and your decision to participate?
I spent my whole life teaching ethics. And in ethics, we try to help people determine how to live well.
You did a great job.
What's a good advice? How do you determine the difference? I am forever grateful to Joyce Hart for that movie.
Yes.
We would not have known that white law enforcement officers, white law enforcement, the laws were there. The white law enforcement officers were keeping some people from registering to vote simply because of the color of their skin. When I saw mounted policemen with truncheons, some of them had made them out of old tires and had put barbed wire around the top of the tire so that they could hold this thing and use it as a battle axe. When I saw white law enforcement officers doing that to innocent people, I thought, I have seen racism in its most naked being. How could those people, how could those men on the following Sunday walk to church with their families and make a travesty of being Christian? How could their character not be affected years later, having known that they beat innocent people for no reason? Don't tell me that that doesn't infect it. it's an infection. It makes you curl up and want to die. I was reared, I'm sure, in a mildly racist environment. We always thought that whites were better than blacks. We call that white supremacy today. We thought Catholics were better than the other people. Irish were better than anybody else. We thought Americans were better than anybody else. But our actions were not cruel and evil. And in racism, the actions corroded the very being of the actors. I cannot thank Joyce enough for that movie. It has been a constant beacon to me. When I think of what is evil, I think of Selma, Alabama. What if your grandmother had been part of that demonstration? What if your little kids had been part of that demonstration? Horses didn't distinguish between whom they were walking on. How could people act that way and assume a normal life when they got home that night and have a drink and a sandwich? How could they act that way? So, thank you very much, Joyce, for it. And I am glad that it's lighted something in me, but it has made my whole effort in ethics to be different. Thank you.
Well, Rosemary, I've got a couple more questions for you since
Were there any moments?
Now, were there any moments during your time in Selma when you felt afraid? I can't imagine, but how did you handle those emotions? Please.
When we were walking in that little short walk that we had from Brown Chapel to where the cops were standing across the thing, I heard someone say, put the nuns in the middle and put men around them to protect them. That was the only time I felt a frisson of being scared out of my socks. We were surrounded by people who were supporting us.
Well, if you could go back and speak to your younger self before the march, would there be anything you'd tell yourself? What would you say?
If I could go back to my younger self, it's a long way. I would redouble my efforts to enable people to know what it means to act well. I don't think we do that much reflection anymore. We're too busy shopping. How can I best act well? And to have those conversations and to grow in virtue. Dear Lord, we've got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. I turn now to our film director, Joyce. Joyce, can you tell us what initially drew you to tell the story of the sisters' involvement in Selma? It's really a chapter of history that many Americans are not familiar with. Can you share with us the inspiration?
Let me start. Is it?
Yeah.
Let me start by thanking everyone here because this is what filmmakers live for. All those years and hours of struggling and doubting yourself and wondering if this story is worth telling, this is what pays off finally. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. This project started after I'd made a couple of films for PBS, and I knew that PBS is where I belonged. So I started looking for people who were developing projects for PBS, and this filmmaker was doing this 6-part series on the history of women religious in America. 6 parts. And this was a relatively small station in Middle California, actually closer to what's now the Silicon Valley. So I thought, well, maybe this will go through, and this is something I know nothing about, so let me join her. And she was very happy to have my support and help. We did a lot of archival research, and then the station pulled out. They said it was too big a project for them, they couldn't support us anymore. By which time, she had found the footage of Sister Antona speaking in Selma, which you all saw in the film. And she had contacted Sister Antona. So before the days of Zoom, we got on a conference phone call and talked to Sister Antona. And she was very skeptical about being the star of this film, everyone else at that point. So, but we had heard her talk about her experience, and both Lisa Plendl, my co-producer, and I, we decided she's a star. Then we got a little money raised, went down to Selma, and met Alston Fitz, the historian who introduced us to genteel racism. He took us around, and that's where we found out about the Selma mission and about the work of the SSJR. He also said, you should have Father Willett in the film, but he doesn't do interviews. And he said, well, if you could get someone from the SSJR Mother House to contact him, then maybe. The response was, anything for the sisters. One request, and we got his interview. And at that point, Lisa, my co-producer, and I knew that this film should be made. Because when participants are kind of invested in the story, and you have an issue which, although the details are not known, an issue which is nationally known and somewhat controversial, you have something which you need to pursue. And so I was talking to Sister Marion, I think yesterday, and we talked about a calling. So like sisters have a calling, filmmakers have a calling too, documentary filmmakers. So we felt this call. Unfortunately, Lisa Plendl had to quit. She had other commitments, so I was left alone to finish the film. At that point, I started looking, I wanted to apply for a humanities grant, so I needed academic support. And so I contacted all of the authors of books which were written on sisters, you know, and I knew that there had been a community of sisters from the Midwest that had gone to Selma. And we were talking, Carol Coburn is here today. Carol, you want to... To answer your question, she's the one that gave me the context to that story. So she spelled out the history, and she told me about all of the other elements needed to be in this story for it to be a complete and complex story of civil rights protest. And that's how it happened.
Thank you. And so you're alluding to your research, and I'm wondering, during your research and filming, what kind of surprising elements or untold stories did you find yourself discovering that really changed your understanding of the civil rights movement?
Thank you for asking that question because I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time. You know who gave me the best footage on those 2 weeks in between? Canadian Broadcasting and Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings, Canadian, was working for Canadian Broadcasting. Mainstream American Broadcasting came down for Bloody Sunday, left. They weren't interested in the development of the civil rights movement. They were interested in the dramatic moments and all the celebrities visiting. So they came back for Montgomery. You know, when people entered Montgomery, they were back. But it was the Canadian Broadcasting people that stuck it out there and filmed all those people in the rain, like Bishop Anderson and Smitherman and that exchange in the rain, the Brown Chapel stuff. That was all Canadian Broadcasting. So, yeah, so for me, that was the biggest surprise. And then, of course, all of the other, I include with archival research, I include stills, news items, radio broadcasts, Sister Roberta and Sister Rosemary's interview at KMOX. They dug out the tape, and finally, nobody had kind of asked for the tape for a long time, so they dug out the tape for me. And about Mr. Vatterat, I learned about his support of the flight and all of those arrangements because I asked the archives of St. Louis Post-Dispatch for pictures. And they had that picture of the sisters boarding the plane. So when I got that picture, I said, can I see the report that you wrote with this picture? And so they sent me the report. And so that's how I found out how that, and Sister Rosemary, in the archival material that's stored now at the Consolidated Archives, you have the full story from Sister Rosemary and Sister Roberta, what the pilot said, and the story of that flight. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there.
So why do you think it's particularly important to tell the stories of these sisters today? And what has been the reaction from audiences, especially our younger generation?
Let me take the second part of the question first, because unfortunately I don't meet younger audiences for my films much because they all go to PBS and then I don't know who's watching. I just get numbers. But when the pandemic closure happened, I kept getting emails from people who were using the DVD in classrooms. And PBS Home Video was producing DVDs at that point. So the request was for this film to be released online. So and I think PBS Home Video got requests too, which is why they complied. So when my requests also were added to the request to PBS Home Video, they added it to their Canopy list. You know what Canopy is, right? Okay. For those who don't know Canopy, Canopy is a streaming service used by libraries. The public library system pays for it, and if you have a library card, you can pretty much get any documentary and some good feature films too. But all of my films are now available through the public library on Canopy. So that's when they released it. And since I got the question in the mail, I contacted one of the Dayton University professors who had asked for it. And I asked her, well, do you use the Canopy? She said, not only do I use it, the students just go and find it themselves. So obviously both the public library and the streaming service is working. So the young generation, I don't know in general, but obviously some people are watching. So, and then to answer the other part of the question, what do I want with this film? Is that
Well, why do you think it's particularly important to tell
why it's important?
the story?
Because I think it tells an alternative alternate history of feminism in this country. And I found it very inspiring myself because I was getting tired of this backlash against feminism. And growing up in India, I realized that feminism often, the contribution of women, I don't want to call it feminism, the contribution of women often starts in many different ways, in many homes, in communities, in ways that we don't know about. I mean, if you think of the World War efforts, how the women stepped into the factories, you know, that was long before quote-unquote feminism. And this, to me, is a very important alternate history of feminism. And that was one thing that I find very valuable. And the other thing that, as you saw, you know, the people who were inspired to protest, they speak for themselves. And there, I saw it wasn't just women or women of the cloth, it was the men, Father Willett, Bishop Moses Anderson. We had this wonderful interview with him. He's from Selma, actually. And we had this wonderful interview with him, which I just wanted, you know, and it's, again, in the archives for anybody who's interested. All of these people, everyone we talked to, had just so much commitment and so much passion. I realized that when you want to tell a story of change, it has to come from every angle. If you just tell it from one angle, then you're losing part of your audience. And that, to me, is the bottom line. I know I can't get everybody, but however many people that Sister Barbara and you know, the two Sister Barbaras and Sister Rosemary and everybody wanted to reach, I wanted to reach them. And again, it did happen because in New College, and this is the origin of the website, which you will see in a little while. When they did a screening at New College, Gregory Haidt, who had done some research, and he was there, Sister Roberta was in Florida at that time, so she was invited. So she spoke, and Gregory gave us a little bit of the history, and I was there. And at the end, when we asked for questions, there were like at least 20 people in the audience who had been there in Selma those 2 weeks, and they wanted to share their experience. It wasn't questions. They were just looking for an opportunity to tell their experience, their side of the story. And they were not all similar. You know, some of them were protesters, some were residents, you know. And that's when we thought we should have a website, like an oral history, where people can contribute and share and read each other's stories of the different points of view.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Claire to tell us a little bit about your father, his decision, his involvement, your family's involvement.
Yes, thank you, Sister. Can I first invite all my family, please, to stand? Thank you very much. Sister was not going to let me get by without having you all stand in. First, thank you to the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Carondelet for hosting this event and this memory of 60 years ago. I'm here representing Charles Vatterott, and I'm one of many, as you know, there's a few of them out there. And we had the unique experience of growing up in the legend of his story. It's humbling to sit in between and next to the sisters that actually were there. So it's with reverence and with humility that I try to tell his story, but really you're really the hero too. So what I understand is I was asked to talk a little bit about what motivated him and how his impact and his values impacted us and continue to impact us today. On the evening of Bloody Sunday, Reverend Dr. King called his network of religious leaders to ask them to join him in another march in a couple days, but come dressed in their full cleric garb, in full view, to make a statement. One of the people he called was Cardinal Joseph Ritter of St. Louis Archdiocese, who then called his good friend Charles Vatterott. And they had been friends since 1946, when my dad, Charlie, was the president of the St. Louis Catholic Interracial Justice Council. And then so my dad was apparently financed the 2 planes from Kansas City, one from Kansas City and one from St. Louis, to allow the religious an opportunity to attend the march. Y'all didn't have much time, from what I understand, at all, from Sunday evening. While we were hearing the news, Martin Luther King was on the phone rounding up his band of religious buddies. In addition, so that's what now they ended up showing up, which is now called Turnaround Tuesday on March 9th, 1965. In addition to chartering the plane, he also brought with him a briefcase of $25,000 in cash, just in case any of the sisters would be arrested. And I heard this from Jerry Holder, my late brother-in-law, Jerry Holder, who was there with him. He might have even had to hold on to the briefcase himself, who said that, the men, they can handle a night in jail, but not the sisters. And I don't think we were really fully aware as a family what was going on. Maybe our older siblings were, but the younger set, I don't fully really understood what was going on at the time. But I do think he didn't want to alarm us, but I do believe he was very, very proud of the diverse representation of religious leaders who jumped on that plane at a moment's notice to volunteer in March right after Bloody Sunday. He returned to Selma with members of the church to present the relic of St. Martin de Porres to the family of Reverend James Reed, who was killed in Selma, beaten to death actually, on March 11th. And then 2 weeks later, he joined 400 St. Louisans for a 5-day, 50-mile journey to Montgomery, Alabama, which was in March 20th to 25th, I believe, where my brother Greg Vatterott and his good friend Jerry Ortballs, who is here somewhere. Jerry, if you could, Greg, thank you. Decided to drive down and attend and continue the walk. My dad was born in 1902. He was the son of German immigrant and the eldest of 11 children in a large, extremely poor Catholic family. There, he experienced religious and national discrimination firsthand in his early years in St. Louis, where he lived his whole life. We think that this discrimination and his faith really helped shape his social justice activism, starting even in his early 20s when he opened up a soup kitchen in Kinloch during the Depression. According to my older sister Kathleen Valenta, he was, as the eldest, he felt a deep personal responsibility for others and showed this principle through what he knew best, his business. He passed away at the age of 69 in 1971, which was about 7 years after the march. He was truly a man for others and a longtime member of the Jesuit Manresa Society, where he was required to write an annual paper on a special topic, and we are fortunate enough to have those papers today. In one of his very early papers, he defended what to him meant love of God and love of neighbor. He called it an urgent call to white Americans to help our colored brethren to have equality. He wrote that instead of following "we are safe, it doesn't concern us" attitude, we have a responsibility, as Christ taught us, that all people are created equal and possess inherent dignity. He was 43 at the time when he wrote that. Soon in 1947, he would help Cardinal Ritter desegregate the Catholic schools, which I understand was not an easy task. He was very, very committed to racial equity at a time when it really wasn't popular for white men of status to take a very public position. But despite never ever attending high school, he started his construction company when he was 17. And according to, again, my late brother, Jerry Holden, he didn't think he could change the world, but he did believe in doing things he thought could result in good outcomes. Jerry, as I said, Jerry traveled with him to Selma. And Jerry said if it wasn't for the sisters, he felt that things could have gotten a lot more violent. That the sisters' presence allowed people to sit and to watch and observe. I don't know if you felt that, sister, but that was the observation of someone who was there. I think that what I love, can I continue? Okay, great. So Dr. King, yes, sister, the ultimate, as Dr. King said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience, but where he stands in moments of challenge and controversy. And I learned early, and I think my siblings would agree too, that leadership matters. And in St. Louis, we had a cardinal who took a stand on the right side of history, while there were others, like Bishop Tulin, who did not. And actually threatened your sisters, as I understand you were telling me before. The fact that the Catholic Church in Selma would not harbor any protesters on the property just left a huge impression on us. You know, as his children, we know that today he was on the right side of history, but it is not easy to take a stand against segregation and redlining and preventing people from voting. But you have to speak up, which is what Sister Maureen had mentioned earlier. I think we were all influenced. I had a chance to ask my siblings, about what they thought. And I think when I think about how we were all influenced by his civil rights, there's, again, 17 of us. Some of us have joined my dad up in heaven. But when I think about, like Chris, my brother Chris Badrat's here, you know, he has aligned his action with this deep sense of education and the value of education. My sister Mary Ann Holden championed democracy every day of her life. Jenny Coughlin is here. She's a tireless supporter of fair wage and union representation. I think I think all of my siblings would agree that our brother John embodied our dad's ethics and social justice values most evidently, especially since they were both, influenced by Jesuits and men and women called for others. I could stop there, or okay, a couple more minutes. Okay, so I think we all learned, as Jenny once told me, we learned early about the golden rule that you have to always think about others and how you want to be treated. My dad continued his position on anti-racism as an allyship and support. As Betty, my sister, told me that she was not allowed to go to her Spady grade school picnic because it was at the park, which was Dr. Philip Venable's property. And I remember my dad standing up in defense of this. How can this decent man who bought the property before not be allowed to build his home? Anyway, so I think that we just learned, and I believe that because we come from a position of privilege, we are required to see the people on that bridge in 1965 as an invitation to support and advocate for the rights of all marginalized people. I think as a lay person in my work today with the Mariac Mission Fund, I admire the women religious so completely. They shape this country. They educate it, they provide care, they provide social services, and I am in awe of them. And I think as a social worker and leading a Catholic ministry, I see clearly how the CSJs and other religious women have led. And if I do myself well, live well, act well. You think so? Okay, good. All right, that's it. I think he's with that, I just want to say I'm grateful to be here, and I'm only one of many. And I'm grateful that we had a chance to at least give his story a little airtime. Thank you.
Thank you. and for sharing your experience and insights with us today. The courage and conviction and compassion demonstrated by everyone involved in the Selma March really continues to inspire us here today to stand up for justice. And so before we move to a brief presentation from the Carondelet Consolidated Archives and our Q&A session, we'd like to share with you a special video message from Therese Stableby, who is a former sister of Loretto, who was unable to join us in person today. Therese was among the sisters who traveled to Selma, and in this brief message, she shares her personal recollections and reflections on how that experience shaped her understanding of justice and community.
Special greetings to all of you from Therese in Northern California. At this time in our world, a time of weariness, a time of hatred, polarization, and so much more, my heart and mind take me back to the 60s, walking in Selma, protesting and trying to bring a sense of equality, a sense of longing for Martin Luther King Jr.'s beloved community, a time of getting in the way, suggested by John Lewis, and a time of walking together for peace and justice. Every time I think of being in Selma and feeling the tension of concern, as well as facing possible tear gas coming in and at our faces, I know I would do it all again. Now, I ask that our younger brothers and sisters, leaders of all faiths, neighbors and friends, to continue this legacy of the marches that will and need to keep going now more than ever, to bring about a time in the future when all people will rise up and be ready to walk together in gentle synodality and make room for all of humanity by our love for each other, not rely on AI. To bring about the warmth of togetherness and a peaceful unitedness. I know we will want to do this from wherever we are and for however long it takes. As we move on, may we together remember the words of Rabbi Abraham Heschel. Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. From Therese Stableby.
We also received a written statement from another former sister of Loretto in the film, Christine Nava. If I could just read that to you quickly here. As we commemorate the 60th anniversary of the momentous civil rights marches of the 1960s, I'm reminded it was the social injustices, the hate, the inhumane treatment of the blacks that gave rise to the civil rights movement. I'm reminded of the courage of those walking in Selma in face of the threatening Alabama militia and of the reverent behavior of the marchers. I'm reminded of the sense of urgency in the faces of the young students dashing about, asserting their role in the march. I'm also reminded that it was the courage, determination, and resilience of Martin Luther King and his followers that shaped the movement and led to significant achievements. We are in a moment of history now when hatred, divisiveness, disregard for human and non-human life threatens our very existence. We are in a crisis that reaches and affects humanity across the oceans. As in Selma, those many years ago, we answered the call to bear witness to human rights. Today, we are called to bear witness to love over hate. This is hard work that requires the resilience, courage, and determination of the leaders of the civil rights movement. My hope is that the younger generation will answer the call to work to reclaim the heart of democracy. Christine Nana.
Hello, I'm Catherine Lucy, the Director of the Carondelet Consolidated Archives, which is the archival repository for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, located here in St. Louis. Thank you again to our panelists for joining us today and for sharing their amazing stories and perspectives. The Sisters of Selma documentary collection used to reside at Avila University in Kansas City. When I learned in late 2023 that Avila needed to find a new home for the collection, I immediately approached my department liaison to discuss the feasibility of housing and materials. We agreed that we had a strong argument for adding our name to the list of possible new homes to continue preserving these historic materials. Not only did 3 of our sisters march in Selma, but we are also centrally located in the United States to conveniently serve scholars and researchers from all over. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, New York, initially showed interest in having the collection, but they were ultimately unable to take it. Our proposal to transfer the archives here was ultimately accepted by both Joyce Hart and Avila University, and the materials were soon transported to St. Louis. As part of the transfer agreement, we agreed to create a website dedicated to the Civil Rights March, and the wheels were soon set in motion to hire a digital archivist to help accomplish this monumental task. We also had the support of our archival partners with the St. Louis Catholic Archives Collective, who we send a special thank you to. And I would now like to introduce you to our digital archivist, Sarah Copeman, who will publicly unveil our brand new educational website for the Sisters of Selma.
Hello, my name is Sarah Copeman, and I'm thrilled to be here today as the digital archivist for the Carondelet Consolidated Archives. I joined the team back in November with an exciting mission to create a dedicated website for the Sisters of Selma collection. The project has been the heart of my work with the CSJs, and it has been an incredible journey to bring this piece of history to life in a digital space. The Sisters of Selma collection tells a powerful story of faith, courage, and social justice, and this website aims to preserve and share that legacy with a wider audience. It has been a privilege to work on this project. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy exploring this website as much as I enjoyed creating it.
Welcome to the Sisters of Selma Bearing Witness for Change website. This website is dedicated to showcasing our archival collection. Here you'll find archival materials that tell the story of the Catholic sisters who were missioned in Selma. The homepage serves as a gateway to the site, offering an overview of the documentary, historical background, and the sisters' pivotal role in the Selma marches. Here, you'll find links to explore archival footage, untold stories, and ways to get involved in preserving this important history. The film page features the full-length documentary Sisters of Selma Bearing Witness for Change. Visitors can watch the film directly on this page. The Selma Stories blog is a collection of articles that feature previously unseen interviews from the film with our archival materials and reflections that explore the events of 1965. Written to showcase the archival materials in a cohesive and engaging way, these posts offer insights into the sisters' experiences, the civil rights movement, and the context surrounding them. covering a wide range of topics and stories from Bloody Sunday, the journey from St. Louis to Selma, and the Catholic Church's stance on civil rights. This blog provides a taste of what is available to explore in the collection. The search bar allows visitors to easily find specific topics, people, or events they want to learn more about. Whether you're researching a particular sister or a key moment in the Selma marches, this tool helps you navigate the site with ease. The biographies page introduces the sisters who participated in the Selma marches, as well as the filmmakers and historians who brought their stories to life. From Sister Antona Ebo, the first African-American Catholic sister to march in Selma, to Joyce Rehart, the director of the documentary. These profiles highlight the diverse voices and contributions that shaped this historic moment. The contact page is your pathway to connecting with us. You can use this form if you have questions about the archives, want to share your own story related to Selma, or are interested in scheduling a visit to the Carondelet Consolidated Archives. This form makes it easy to reach out. The Additional Resources page offers tools like finding aids, which serve as guides to navigating the archival collections. These aids provide context and structure, making it easier for researchers, educators, and history enthusiasts to explore the materials. You'll also find links to our archival partners, whose contributions have been invaluable in creating this site. The Sisters of Selma Bearing Witness for Change website is more than a collection of resources. It's a call to action. It challenges us to reflect on the past, engage with the present, and work towards a more just and compassionate future. We invite you to explore the site and join us in honoring these courageous women.
Thank you. Now we'd like to invite all of you, our audience, to join in this conversation. We'll begin our Q&A session with special remarks from someone who was there in Selma alongside our sisters. So before we open the floor to general questions, I'd like to recognize and welcome Mr. Jerry Ortbals. Jerry traveled to Selma with Greg Vatterat during these momentous days in 1965. Mr. Ortbals was part of the group of lay people who surrounded the sisters during the march, forming a protective circle to keep them safe. His firsthand experience and commitment to justice offer yet another perspective on the events we're commemorating today. So, Mr. Ortbals, we welcome your reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. By way of further introduction, I am 2 years retired from 53 years of law practice at the firm of Brian Cave, and I am now in full retirement. Back in 1965, I was a second-year law student at St. Louis University. When we were approached, and by we I mean 4 of us, including my friend, colleague, and classmate, Greg Vatterat, one of those 17 siblings mentioned earlier, and we were asked if we would be willing to be part of a contingent from the St. Louis University Law School to represent the school and the Catholic community in supporting the march. And of course, we were all more than eager to do so, but we were also law students, which is to say we were broke. So we had to figure out a way to get to Selma for the least amount of money. And that idea devolved on Greg Vatterat's car, which we had. And so we decided to drive all night, avoiding the hotels today, and to go on the cheap. Well, we left about 11 o'clock at night, and I think we drove straight through for about 14 hours. We came prepared with a story we concocted in case we were stopped by state troopers, which indeed we were, about being on our way to Selma for a spring break. And it worked. We were okay. The guy said, y'all have fun now, do you? So, we were in our street clothes, our travel clothes, which were pretty grungy. And the idea was to show the support of people who were law students, and we were supposed to be dressed like law students. stay in our suits and ties. So we brought those with us, and we had to figure out a way to make the change. And so I suggested that we go to the parish house in Montgomery. And we did, and I was the one sent to knock on the door, and I did, and this somewhat dilapidated screen door opened, and there was a Catholic priest, apparently a votary of Bishop Tulin, because his first words to me were, "What are you boys doing here?" And I said, "Well, Father, we're here to march with Dr. King to Montgomery." And he said, "Now, don't you boys have any problems in St. Louis?" I said, "Well, yes, we do." He said, "Good. Go solve them." And that's so we were sort of at ends about how to change. We were driving down this 2-lane highway, and we spotted a sign that said it was a motel. It said, "Trucker's Nap, $2. Well, it didn't take us long to figure out what the objective of that particular venue was. But we decided that if the four of us each pulled 50 cents, we could afford the $2 to get the change and clean up. So we did. And we then made our way and joined the march. But I've always been amused to think that we were rejected at the parish house and taken into the house of Bill. In any case, we were finally directed to the group, and we did indeed form a phalanx around some of the sisters. That was part of our stated purpose. The other purpose was, of course, to show that the Catholic Church supported in a broad way the efforts of Selma and the objective of the march. And it was an unforgettable experience, and I won't bore you with further narrative about various anecdotes, but there were some good ones. I think the question you might be asking is, how did this affect you going forward? What did you come away with from that march in Selma? And I will tell you that I was, of course, finishing law school and planning to practice. I had no grandiose ideas that I would be elevated to the Supreme Court, so I didn't think that I'd probably have any impact on civil rights in that regard. So I said, what can I do that is effective and has an impact in a positive way on disadvantaged minorities? And I decided that the best thing I could do would be to incorporate elements of public service or public interest law into my private practice. And so I started on that almost immediately after I came back from the military, and I would represent people who didn't have the money to retain my services. And then that took on a more formal aspect, as my friend Ann Rodman will remember, when I agreed in collaboration with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri to start a clinic for the homeless veterans down at St. Patrick's Center. And I'm I did that. It was very successful. It became a replicable model for other similar clinics. And then I decided that I wanted to do more, so I ran for president of the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis, and I made my sole focus a program that we were in partnership with Legal Services on called the Volunteer Lawyer Program. And at the time we started that, Missouri was woeful in its participation. We were about 48th in the nation in terms of lawyers who volunteered to do work for the poor. We started this program. I went around to the heads of the 25 largest firms in St. Louis, got them all to agree to give a certain amount of hours for their associates to the Legal Services Volunteer Lawyer Program. By virtue of that, we went from being 48th to being number 21, and I think we've since improved on that, and we have a great reputation for having volunteer lawyers. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think my efforts in pro bono are the fruit of my march in Selma, and I only hope that in some way they've had a real-life impact on people who certainly need our help and our support. And I thank you all for the opportunity to talk about my experience.
Thank you, Jim. So now the floor is open, and we'd like to hear from you. Any questions that you would like to address to any one of our speakers, or a question in general? We have about 15 minutes, and we don't want anybody to stand in the way of the reception at Cal. But please feel free to ask some questions of our panel. We have microphones that will come to you.
I just wish to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for your witness. Thank you for your courage. courageousness and your bravery, which you may not have realized that you did that day, but you've had an impact on so many. And I just want to say thank you for that gift. I have a quick question really for the filmmaker, she alluded to it, but for anyone, which is about the young, right? I'm in my 50s. You know, I have people who, you know, right, but I don't know that we have that many, you know, younger here, you know, that are in their teens or 20s present today. So my question, I'm thrilled to hear that it's on PBS and now it's on this website, but how would you encourage young people or schools to learn or to take action so that then they can know history, so therefore we don't repeat it?
Joyce?
I'm sorry, I thought that was a general question. But, as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, what I aspire to do is make people relate to the individuals in the film. And I hope that somehow the purpose in the person's life comes across and communicates to the person viewing it. Because I personally, when I watch films, if something is kind of spelled out and told, you know, like I'm told to do this, I don't do it. But that's me. So I'm just hoping that people of any age, if they watch this and they can relate to the people like I did. One thing that happened to me was that every time I talked to someone who is involved in the film, like starting with Sister Antona, all of the sisters, down to the person that finished the film in his post-production studio, everyone was 100% committed. And not because they loved me, but because they could relate to the story. They could relate to the people. And it was always, if they could commit to this, then I can too. And including the graphics person, the woman who composed the music, all of the songs that you hear were sung a cappella when interviewees, this is the wonderful thing about being in Selma, people just broke into song. Sister Antona just broke into song. And then we got the composer to compose like the background with the song. And every person, no matter what age group, they responded. They related on a personal level. It wasn't how much I paid them. It's what was being said in the film. And I hope that is what's going to appeal to people of all ages.
Thank you. Another question?
I would like to know, in the film there was an interview at KMOX, and there were 20,000 calls or questions. Were they responded to?
Rosemary? Rosemary? You were there? The calls to KMOX at your service, there were 20,000.
If somebody could write it down, but we do know a little bit about it, that the...
We came home to Kansas City, we came home to St. Louis, and we were all filled with Selma thoughts. And at least 10,000 people, they think, called in over a period of about 6 hours. And for the first time, we heard people say it as they meant it. They weren't all complimentary and saying, "Oh, you dear good little sisters, how nice of you to go down there." There was a lot of, and not just the dragging your habit in the dust. there was a lot of real opposition coming from Canada and all the United States. 40 states participated that night. We are a divided nation when it comes to the matter of race. We people who are trying to act well have a personal responsibility to help overcome that divisiveness in our society. I don't think we can go to bed at night and sleep well if we haven't worked somehow that day to overcome racism in our society.
In the American in 1965 that hopefully will be up on the website eventually, or if it not already is. Sarah could probably give an answer to that. But actually the program was so long that they ended up doing another 2 hours to have even more people call in. So it was a massive program. So, and I think, like Joyce Reed said, that we got the video of her to be on the archival website. So you can hear how St. Louis thinks, which I think is not far off sometimes than today.
Thank you. Another question.
I have a question for Ms. Hart, and that is that earlier there was reference to this film being part of a series, and I wondered about the other parts of the series, if they were ever produced, and how we might be able to access those.
No, the series was never done, unfortunately. It may be a good thing, because when a series is done by one group of people, they all have the same point of view. But since then, there was Sisters on the Bus. I don't know how many people here saw Sisters on the Bus. Yeah, that was done by someone who had seen Sisters of Selma, someone in Pasadena, who kind of knew that story and decided to do it. So eventually, I think all of the stories will get told. And it's better this way because you have all these different points of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question up front.
Mine is just a very short question. I couldn't tell from the film, how long were the Sisters in Selma? Was that a weekend or a week or a month?
The delegation from St. Louis went up Wednesday morning and came back Wednesday evening. The delegation from Kansas City went up Thursday and came back on Saturday. And we stayed at Good Samaritan Hospital overnight. I've canonized our bishops at the time, and also Mr. Batterat, for how they negotiated that and helped us to travel back and forth.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
Sister Mary Leonin, who passed away, she was a BBM sister and later became a diocesan sister in Los Angeles. She went there with the Kansas City contingent on Wednesday. And then the two of them from Los Angeles decided to march to Montgomery. They decided to stay on and march to Montgomery. But of course, they were told to come back. The bishop here, bishop in Los Angeles, was totally against the demonstrations. And so one of them went back, but Sister Mary Leonin decided not to listen to him and marched all the way to Montgomery. So she was there like 2 weeks.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
I would love to ask the sisters, like in your fight for civil rights, what's one thing you have learned or like you heard that you think would help the newer people fight for others?
What kind of advice might you have for the newer generation committed to justice? Any of the sisters?
I can start it, and then I'd like the sisters to carry on. I was inspired by my parents and their generation. I was born after India got independence from the British Empire, and I knew nothing about the United States or any history other than the history of our independence and the struggle for it. ironically, Martin Luther King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, and he says that, he quotes Mahatma Gandhi in the film. But growing up, we were very aware of partition, of all the things that happened to disrupt our parents' generation in India. Now, here, when I started working on films, I realized that that is an advantage the generation after the Depression and after World Wars had. Like, we learned from our parents, they learned from their parents in this country of what it was like to live through the Depression and how to deal with it and so forth. And I wonder if the generation that's growing up now doesn't have a similar experience that's handed down from the parents. And I don't know enough about the United States, so what I would say is if you, as a young person, want to contribute something, we all do as young people, we all want to contribute. We don't want to be treated as, the younger generation's coming up, we've done everything, let them figure it out. But if, I remember trying to figure it out by looking at what in my surroundings I need to change for myself, not for anybody else, but for myself. When I was going through student protests in my city, there were friends of mine climbing over the gates to kind of get rid of to face the cops. On the other hand, there were students that were staying away. And I had to think about my family's history with partition and my family's history with reestablishment in India to decide whether I was going to climb the gate or whether I was going to stay. It was a moment that for me was, relevant. But for young people today, maybe it's electronics, it's AI, how to use it, where to use it, to be on social media, to engage in pointless arguments. For us it seems pointless, maybe to you it doesn't seem pointless, but only you can decide. Like, when I didn't go over the gate, I got a lot of blowback from my friends. My parents didn't understand why I was even there. But I knew that was a moment when I knew what I had to do. So that would be my message. I can't tell you, nobody can tell you, even your best friend can't tell you, only you can tell you.
Thank you, and is there any sister who'd like to offer a closing comment?
My question is, in your fight, in your fight for civil rights, what advice would you give to young people? The same advice I would give to kids, to middle-aged, and to us oldsters. Treat every person with dignity. There is a scarcity in our culture today of kindness. I think every one of us ought to get out of bed in the morning resolving to be kind that day. It'd be a treat. It'd be a treat. It might even be a treat for yourself.
Thank you. I see by the clock on my arm it's 3:30. I'm sorry?
Maybe one more.
One more question. There's someone out there with a question.
I'm sorry, I don't need a microphone. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello. With the new data archive being available, who are you most excited to have access to this amazing amount of history?
Who are you most excited about having access to this history? Archivists? Anyone have an answer?
I think the answer is just anyone. It can be scholars, it can be researchers, it can be the general public. I don't know how easily you heard it in the video, but we are going to be adding content to the website over time. There was just no ability to get everything uploaded in just a few months' time. And we have 70-ish hours of unedited footage to go through, plus people will be coming to us with stories that we want to add, and we are working to get those KMOX recordings. We don't have permission yet, but we're just hoping anyone that either just is interested in the voter suppression, civil rights, Selma, the sisters, any of that, they're all going to be welcome to use the website. And then we, of course, will be there to answer questions if anyone wants to come in person and view some of the artifacts we have, reproductions of which are out in the lobby at the archive table. If you haven't been there yet, we have copies of some of the letters that were sent to the sisters of people that were unhappy about their appearance in the marches. So really just anyone, we're hoping just anyone is going to want to use it. And let's share the news, let's share the site, and get people interested in this monumental historic moment that we're all here celebrating for 60 years today. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know what else to say, except I am extremely proud to be able to say I am a sister. Now all we have to do is follow their example. And I'm glad Claire was part of this too, because that also reminds us we don't do it alone. We do it together. And speaking of that, I would like to thank the committee that put all this together. So if they would stand when I call their names. First of all, Sister Barbara Moore. Sister Marian Weinzeppel. Associate Maureen Wessel. Marie McGeehan. Marie is the director of our Mission Advancement Office. Catherine Lucy. Director of the Carondelet Consolidated Archives, Sarah Kaufman. Redmond Riley from our Communications Office. And our Director of Communications, Colleen Kelly. As we bring this powerful afternoon to a close, I want to express our deepest gratitude to those on the panel for sharing their stories with such generosity and courage. Your witness continues to inspire us, reminding us that the work of justice is never just history. It is a living legacy that calls us to action. Today, our world faces different challenges, but the call to unity and reconciliation remains just as urgent. As Sisters of St. Joseph and Associates, we believe that together we are more. No single person can solve the injustices of our time, but in community, supporting one another, challenging one another, and walking alongside one another, transformation becomes possible. Gatherings like today remind us of our shared history, but they also help us reimagine what is possible when we stand together. As you leave, I invite you to consider, how can you continue this legacy in your own communities, in your own families? If today's program has moved you, and you'd like to support the continuation of programs like this, we welcome your partnership. Your contributions help us preserve these vital stories and create spaces where justice and community building can flourish. More information is on our table outside, or you can scan the QR code on the back of your programs. There is a basket on the table for donations. But more than anything, this work requires commitment, not just to remember it, but to act it. The sisters and lay people who stood for justice in Selma didn't just show up for a single event. They lived lives dedicated to unity and reconciliation. Their example calls us to do the same. Thank you all for being part of the journey. Please join us for the reception out in the entrance, where we can continue to share stories and dreams of a better future. I'd like to end with a quote from an African-American writer and activist, Brian Stevenson. "Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. Hope is our superpower. Hope is our superpower."